Thanks for being here. What? Oh, 25 seconds. Okay. I keep having the expectation that July and August numbers are going to go really down, but suddenly people are back, so I'm glad. Not just it's, I don't just like, seats in the chairs, but it's nice to see you, so I'm glad you're here on this morning. Welcome here. You that are watching from home, welcome here. We are glad you're here. As always, make yourself at home. Feel free to move around. I'm certainly not disturbed if you need to move around, fill up on coffee or tea or whatever you need to do. After the service, of course, there will always be time to get to know one another, so do that. Once again, there's some new faces or a few faces that are not exactly new, but you haven't seen the faces, since they were wearing masks many, many months ago. So make sure you get caught up with what's going on. More or less normal service in a moment. Isaac is going to be up to help us with a couple songs. I appreciate they're still struggling with the cough, but he was willing to fill in again this morning. We're grateful for that. Also, things are going forward with the paperwork in Vietnam, so maybe in a month or two the family can join. So keep praying about that. But let's pray, and then we'll get going this morning. Now, Lord, this morning I pray that we could strive to turn off all of the other kind of messages that come into our minds, even on a Sunday morning or in the last week. I pray that we would take care to tune in to you especially, and in all the other things that we do, the words that we sing, or the words that I say. I pray that beyond that and above that your word would prevail. I pray that you would speak to our minds and our hearts. I pray that we would be willing to accept the word that you have for us. And I pray now that we can just be confident that you are with us, however we are feeling, whether we are aware of your presence. You are here, and we're grateful for that. So, Lord, do your work this morning. Amen. Okay, Isaac.
Good morning, church. Today, my music band, we have a new member. To give him the clap. So let's stand up and worship the Lord. Great is your faithfulness, O God. You wrestle with us in the heart. You lead us by still water into mercy, and nothing can keep us apart. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough. Great is your love and justice, God. You use the weak to make the strong. You lead us in the song of your salvation. And all the people sing along. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough, heaven reaching down to us. Your grace is enough for me, for me. My Father, I adore you more than anything my heart could wish for. I just want you. And Jesus, my beloved Savior, everything I have, I owe to you. I owe it all to you. And angels come and adore you. And we, your children, worship you. You are my word, you are my God, and I lay down my life for you. You are my Lord, the one I love. No one could ever take your place. And everything I have I give to you, my Lord, the one I live for. I live for you. And all my days I give from you. I pray I use them as you want to. Use them for you. And angels come and adore you. And we, your children, worship you. You are my word, you are my God, and I lay down my life for you. You are my Lord, the one I love. No one could never take your place. You are my word, you are my God, and I lay down my life for you. You are my Lord, the one I love. No one could ever take your place. You are my world, you are my God, and I lay down my life for you. You are my Lord, the one I love. No one could ever take your place. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dwight. Was sitting at the piano before the service, and Isaac just quickly recruited him. So that's just the stage for pretty soon, just a step for Dwight to help us in leading worship some as well. So it was just like, I think that was all arranged providentially for you to take that step. But yeah, once again, thanks for being here. Like I said at the beginning, I'm never quite sure who's going to be here in July and August, because a lot of people, our regulars, are gone for the summer. But stay tuned in case we do something different. I thought years ago in July, we didn't even have a Sunday service. We would just go to a Cafe Nizza on Sunday morning, and we would just meet together because so many people were gone. We're not going to do that. But I did think if we have fewer numbers, and if maybe we don't have a worship leader on a Sunday, we might have a brunch and Bible morning. Okay, so come at 10:30, we'll have a meal. We'll have tables, have a meal, but we'll spend some time in the Word as well. So that might even be a last-minute kind of thing. So keep up on social media so you know what's going on. You can bring some food. In any case, I don't know what to expect the rest of this summer, except we'll be here. At least we plan to be here, and we know that God will be here. Yeah. Oh. Okay. You might need a microphone for announcement. Okay. Let's just spend a few minutes praying for Lona. Her father died on Friday. Okay. Could some people come around her, please, and spend some time praying for her? Okay. A part of what we've been doing here for many, many years, and so yeah, keep praying for that. Okay, we're turning again to Nehemiah. We have a couple more weeks in this kind of study of Ezra and Nehemiah. This Sunday and next Sunday will be kind of a two-part sermon that will be related to one another, but you might recall some time ago in an earlier sermon, we were reminding ourselves of expectations and the importance of managing our expectations and not necessarily expecting everything to go smoothly. And I made the point then that even when God is involved, reality can still often look like this. So Ezra and Nehemiah is a story of that covers actually about 100 years. Lots of ups and downs, some good leadership examples, but also a lot of opposition, a lot of failure on the part of people, and we're going to see that, in the next 2 weeks. And all of that reminds us that this is an unfinished story. And even Ezra and Nehemiah is not going to end on an altogether positive note. Okay, because it's an unfinished story. When the story of Nehemiah ends, the story is not over. And in fact, the main part of the story has not even come on the scene. We're still in this lots of ups and downs and struggles and so forth. And that just reminds us we need to be realistic about where we are. Okay, I mean, when we're reading especially parts of the Old Testament, we need to be realistic about where we are in the story. Okay, we are at a time before Jesus has come. Okay, we need to be realistic about that. We also need to be realistic about who we are. Okay, these are stories that are full of humans who are not altogether perfect. In fact, some of them are far from perfect. And part of the good news of these stories is that God is continuing to use these people even when they are not necessarily perfect. And again, even when some are far from perfect, God continues to use them. But we need to be realistic about who we are, what our strengths are, but also what our weaknesses are. And we need to take into account as we make decisions who we are and where we are in the story. So the last few weeks we've been looking at Nehemiah chapter 9, and we spent a lot of time in that chapter. I really want to encourage you again to read and reread that chapter. That one chapter alone will give you kind of a great theology of the Old Testament. But it's also a prayer of confession, and even though they are confessing who God is, they're also very much confessing who they are and their failures and why they are where they are, why they are kind of out of exile, but kind of not out of exile, yet they're still under the domination of the big empires. So they confess their sin, and at the end of that, they come to this. They say, in view of all of this, in view of everything that they've said throughout that chapter, we are making a binding agreement. We're even putting it in writing. Okay, that might not be a bad idea. I know some of you keep journals and you put your thoughts, and maybe commitments in writing. That's probably a good thing. I've not been very disciplined to do that, but that's what they did. They put this agreement in writing, and their leaders, they're kind of, you might say, political and religious leaders, which all kind of work together. Then our leaders, our Levites and our priests, are fixing their seals to it. And so we have a confession that is leading to action. Okay, they're going to do something about what they have said, so that it actually makes a difference. I mean, all of us have kind of felt bad about something that we have done. Okay, but I imagine if I asked you to raise your hand, how many of you have felt bad about something you've done, but never did anything different as a result? All of us would raise our hands. We've all, thought, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, but a week later, oh, I wish I hadn't done that this week, and then a week, okay? That's typical human response. Here, they're trying to resist, that typical human response of just reacting emotionally or even verbally, but they're actually putting it into action. And so the next part of chapter 10 is kind of this agreement. But first, they give all the names of the many people who are signing this document to say, we are committed to do these things. And so we're going to look at chapter 10. We're not going to go through the names again. We spent a good bit of time looking at all the names in Ezra and Nehemiah and talking about why those names are significant. We're not going to do that now, but we're going to mainly look at this agreement, what they put into writing that they're going to do, and try to figure out what we can learn from this. And I want to say kind of up front that this is not, for me, a necessarily fun sermon to preach. Okay, the last few weeks, I really enjoyed that message, those messages, especially, when you emphasize that, God is merciful and gracious, slow to anger. I could preach on that all day. And then last week, just looking at the character of God, that brings great joy to give that message, and I think you felt it because we sang together as a response to that message, and it'd be nice to stay on that message. This message there's parts of this I would rather skip. Partially it might make some of you a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, I would rather not make you uncomfortable. I would rather you like me and be happy with me. But in any case, we need to learn what we're meant to learn from this chapter. At the end of chapter 10, the last statement of this agreement is, we will not neglect the house of our God. We will not neglect the house of our God. And a lot of what they agreed to do is related to the house of God, that is the temple, and what's going on in the temple. And so that gathers a lot of their agreement. And it's because the temple is what orients their lives in the right direction. Okay, it reminds them of what people they belong to. Okay, it reminds them that there's a God in their midst. I mean, some of you who maybe are not originally from Europe, and I'm from America, and architecture is a little bit different in America, and villages being built are a little bit different. But in Europe, there's a lot of villages and cities. Well, at the high point in the center of the city is the church, and it's very big. And of course, you can look toward Old Riga, and you can see those huge churches there. And Basma was actually some time ago talking to Archbishop of Lutheran Church, Jonas Bonnigs, and he was like, I don't know why those guys built these churches, because now it costs millions to fix those churches. Why did they build these huge brick and stone buildings with high towers? But there's a reason they did that, because no matter where anyone was, they could look and see that, and they're reminded our entire lives are supposed to be oriented to God. Okay, so it wasn't mainly just about the building. It was the building represented God and God's presence there, and that God is bigger than they are. Okay, I mean, that's again one reason why often the cathedral was the biggest building around, to remind people how big God is, and all of our lives need to be oriented around them. Okay, and so that was true in the Old Testament. The temple at the center of people's lives, even the center of their schedules. And so part of what people agreed to is to make sure the temple is going to be supported and the temple work is going to be supported. Okay, so for instance, there's, every year everyone is supposed to give a piece of money, not a large piece of money, but everyone gives that piece of money. Okay, then also people were expected to tithe of their income. I mean, for instance, there were burnt offerings being offered, and so wood was necessary, and so there was a plan made to make sure people living in the country would bring a supply of wood to keep it going. They would bring the first fruits of their crops and the first fruits of their animals, and even their firstborn son. All of that was supposed to be dedicated to God. Okay, and so that was part of the agreement, is that everything that was necessary for the temple work to continue, everyone was meant to contribute to it, some percentage. Okay, and so often, for instance, in the country, you would bring what you had to the Levite who's living in your village, and then that Levite would take a tenth of that, and that would go to the temple. And if everyone was contributing, okay, then the work could go on. But that was the expectation, is everyone had a role to play in maintaining the center of life. Now, just a little aside, if Aaron were here, he might be nodding toward the offering box in the back. So I'll just remind you, We do have an offering box in the back. We don't pass it around. Just some people wonder about, can we contribute to this church? And you can, and it's back there. We actually don't put pressure on you. We don't want you to do anything out of guilt or legalism or whatever. But in case you're wondering, there are some expenses in the church, and there is a box back there that can help you to take care of that. So that's a little public service announcement, okay? That's of no benefit to me personally, okay? But I do care about the church, and it's nice to have this meeting room that costs a little money. So in any case, that's been a normal part of the life of the people of God for thousands of years, okay? Again, because the temple is what brings people's lives together. It's the temple, and what happens there gives a center for the community, and it gives a stability. Okay, everyone knows what's there, everyone knows the schedule that works around it, and everyone orients part of their life around that, and that actually gives some peace and stability. It takes at least some parts out of life, out of the unknown and into the known. I mean, for me, of course, I kind of have to be here. You might say it's my job. Okay, but I grew up in church, and my parents were church workers, and so I rarely have ever made a decision, am I going to go to church on Sunday? Okay, it's just, I don't have to worry about that. Should I go this week or not? It's not in the realm of the unknown. I just know Sunday morning, I've got to, get in the car or on the train at a certain time, so that means I have to, get up and get showered, so I have to get up at a certain time, and I just kind of know that actually gives peace and stability. Okay, at least next Sunday morning, there's not many decisions I need to make because they've already been made. Okay, now that may be a bit of extreme, but that's what certain routines do for us, is they give us center and stability. They give us some things that we just know, I'm going to be there, I'm going to do this at least. Okay, and so this is what the temple provides. It actually gives security to the people and a center of life. So they're not going to neglect the house of God. All right, so a lot of what Nehemiah chapter 10 talks about is, how they're going to contribute to it, what that's going to look like, what people are supposed to give, who they give it to, and how they get that to the temple, and how the temple continues its work. But there's a few other little interesting things as well that happen in Nehemiah 10. Let me find it here, verse 31. There's also this, though. When the neighboring peoples bring merchandise or grain to sell on the Sabbath, this is part of their agreement. Okay, when people are bringing food into Jerusalem, for the marketplace, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or on any holy day. Every 7th year we will forego working the land and will cancel all debts. And of course, you're familiar, if you're familiar with the Old Testament, the Sabbath law was very, very important to the people. 1 day a week, no work. It's for recreation, not necessarily playing, but it's recreating, refreshing your body, and also to make sure you are focusing on God. You turn off some parts of your life so that you can focus on that day on kind of shalom, holistic health. So the Sabbath was important, not just, every last day of the week, but also every 7th year, they would just give the crops a rest. Okay, of course, no one did that back then. How can you do that? How can a farmer not plant anything for a year and people still eat? Okay? You can only do that if you plan ahead, but especially you trust God that on the year before the Sabbath, He will provide the crops that will keep you going for a full year. You have to trust God. And of course, all the other nations outside looking at that are going to think that's the stupidest thing in the world. How can you possibly do that? But if they see it working, what they're going to be thinking is, there's a God at work in that dirt, okay, who's making the plants grow and making life possible for that people. Okay, so this is part of their agreement. They put it in writing. We're going to keep the Sabbath. Next week, we're going to look at chapter 13, and we're going to find out that it did not take long at all for the people to kind of drop out of a lot of these commitments. Nehemiah is going to go back, to see the emperor for a while. He's going to be gone. And when he comes back, he's going to find out that a lot of these promises have already been broken. And one of the interesting things that he's going to do when he comes back in chapter 13, he's going to observe, for instance, that the Sabbath is not being kept. He says, "In those days I saw men in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in grain, loading it on donkeys, together with wine, grapes, figs, all sorts of other things. And I warned them against selling food on that day." So there he's warning the Jewish people, stop it. You can't do your buying and selling, on the Sabbath. But then it says, men from Tyre who lived in Jerusalem. These are non-Jewish people. The city of Tyre on the coastland was a major, mercantile city, and a lot of stuff flowed through there. There's lots of, first-class merchants, okay? And so they basically, have set up an office in Jerusalem, and they're importing things. And so these guys who are non-Jewish people, they are not committed to the Sabbath. They're going to sell. Okay, and for the Jewish people, this is kind of a good deal for them because they're thinking, I can keep the Sabbath, I don't have to do any work, and these guys, non-Jewish people, are going to bring the food to my door. It's kind of nice where we live. Sometimes there will be some guy in a van driving down the street. He's going to honk his horn and open the back, and you can buy sacks of potatoes and carrots and apples and that kind of thing. You don't have to even go to Remy. Here's the guy bringing it. That's what's happening in Jerusalem. And everyone is thinking, we're okay, we're not breaking the law. It's those guys who are not obligated. They're selling it. But Nehemiah is not putting up with it. So he says, I rebuked the nobles of Judah and said to them, what is this wicked thing you're doing, desecrating the Sabbath? This is what our forefathers did, and this is why this calamity came. Then it says, when evening shadows fell on the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I ordered the doors to be shut and not open until the Sabbath was over. Nehemiah said, we're locking the gates for 24 hours, and I'm putting my guards at the gates. Okay, and these merchants who thought they could come in, they come to the gates and they're locked, and they're having to spend 24 hours outside the gates. Okay, they're going to learn a lesson here. But Nehemiah, he's quite the strong leader. So once or twice the merchants and sellers of all kinds of goods spent the night outside Jerusalem, but I warned them and said, why do you spend the night by the wall? If you do this again, I will lay hands on you. Okay, we're going to see that Nehemiah will literally lay hands on people if he thinks it's necessary. Okay, he's that kind of leader, okay? But he's trying to get people's lives in order. Now, taking care of the temple, that seems normal. That's kind of the religious, the spiritual life. But now, they're kind of getting into people's economic life. And this is another important lesson that I think we really need to get drilled into our mind, and the danger of separating our religious and spiritual life from the rest of our life. So we have our Sunday life, and okay, we agree to do certain things on Sunday and to think a certain way on Sunday and to act a certain way on Sunday. Okay, but then the rest of the week, we conduct our lives in the way that everyone else conducts their lives, during the week. And so maybe our economic life, we live our economic life according to the principles that everyone else lives their economic life, and it's untouched by what we do in the temple or untouched by what we hear on Sunday in church. If God is the God of everything, then he's the God of every day, and he's the God of every space. Okay, he's not a God that's just for the Sabbath or a God that's just for Sunday, and he's not a God who's just a God for this kind of building. Okay, he's a God for all of our life, and he needs to be at the center of all of our life and all the parts of our life. Our social life, our economic life, our sexual life, our every part of our life. The way we walk down the street, the way we get on public transportation, the way we drive, and once again, I recognize my hypocrisy when it comes to driving. I sometimes kind of don't want God to be with me in the car when I'm driving. Okay, but that's where I am falling short of, and of course, often Basma reminds me, especially when I'm driving home on Sunday morning, it's like, don't you believe anything you just said, 30 minutes ago? Okay. But an important truth is this. Everything communicates. Everything that we do communicates who we are and what we believe. I mean, that's part of what the temple was meant to do. It was a place to connect people to God and connect people with God. And so that's why even what the temple looked like was important, because even the architecture was meant to communicate something about God. Everything communicates. Everything that we do communicates something about who we are, not just what we do on Sunday. I don't think this is an exaggeration. I think this is accurate. No one cares what you do on Sunday morning, okay? No one really cares what you do on Sunday morning. Even though most people in Latvia don't go to church on Sunday, it's got a Christian subculture, a culture that has existed. Churches exist. Everyone knows about that. It's not that big of a deal that we come to church on Sunday. Don't misunderstand me. It's good to come to church on Sunday. I think God cares. But no one out there really cares that you come here. It's okay with them. They don't mind you coming to church, but likewise, they're not necessarily impressed with you. Oh, wow, you go to church on Sunday. Okay, it's probably not that much impressive to them. Okay, what makes a difference is how we conduct the rest of our lives, whether or not our Sunday life impacts our Monday life and Tuesday life and Wednesday life. Everything that we do communicates. Okay? I mean, that's even why, there's some things that we do here. I mean, I wish we had our own space. I would really like to design a different kind of space, although I'm happy with this. But I mean, since we've existed, we've always had coffee and tea. We could all survive without coffee and tea. You could all stop at Narvesen and get a nice cup of coffee, and you could arrive here. Okay, but one of the reasons we keep that up is because it communicates. If someone came to your house, you would offer them a drink. It's a way of making people welcome. To us, it's a way of just saying, you're welcome here. We want you to feel at home here. We want to provide something for you. Okay, it's what it communicates, is significant, not just having a hot drink in the winter, though that's nice as well. Okay, but everything communicates. Our tone of voice communicates. What we wear communicates. What we value communicates. So that's part of the reason why even these Sabbath laws are significant, and they made an agreement concerning the Sabbath laws because it communicates to the nations what's important to them and who they are trusting. Who do you trust with your economic life? And who do you trust with your friendships? And who do you trust with your sexual life? Okay? Our choices communicate something about that. But then what's interesting, and this is my final point and kind of what I am maybe least comfortable talking about this morning, it's fascinating, though, how this agreement starts. Okay, I mean, it ends with that comment, we won't neglect the house of our God. And a lot of it is details about what that looks like, but how it starts, what the first thing that they commit to is really, really fascinating. So if you actually have your device or Bible, in Nehemiah chapter 10, after the list of names, it says the rest of the people, this is in verse, I can't see anymore, verse 28. The rest of the people, the priests, Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple servants, all who separated themselves from the neighboring peoples for the sake of the law of God, together with their wives and all their sons and daughters who are able to understand. We've seen that a few times that, everyone has been a part of listening to the word, even for 3 hours, and then worshiping for 3 hours. Adults, but any of the kids that are old enough to understand the message, they are a part of this. All these now join their brothers, the nobles, and bind themselves with a curse and an oath. Bind themselves with a curse and an oath to follow the law of God given through Moses, the servant of God, to obey carefully all the commands, regulations, decrees of the Lord our God. All the people who have separated themselves from the nations around them, all the people who have separated themselves from all the other lifestyle options, they are making this agreement. And so the first thing they officially agree to do is this. We promise not to give our daughters in marriage to the peoples around us, or take their daughters for our sons. And this is the first thing that they agreed to. And it's really strange to me that this would be at the top of their list. Okay, but if you've been paying attention to Ezra and Nehemiah, this is not the first time this issue has come up. Of the importance of being separated from people who do not belong to God. People who are not followers of God, not being bound to them in a way that they have a kind of control over your life that's going to be dangerous to you. Once again, if we turn to Nehemiah chapter 13, when Nehemiah goes back, sees the emperor, he's gone for probably many, many months, maybe more than a year, and he comes back, he's going to find out that people have not followed this principle. And in chapter 13, in verse 23, it says, "Moreover, in those days I saw men of Judah," okay, good Jewish men, "who married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half their children spoke the language of Ashdod, or the language of the other peoples, and did not know how to speak the language of Judah. They were in mixed marriages, and in this case, they were losing their own culture. Their culture in their home was the culture of the people who did not know God, including their language. Okay, and so they could not live normally in a Jewish society because their kids didn't even know the language anymore. Now, this is what Nehemiah did, and I don't know if this was right or wrong, and this, you might be grateful that this is not my personality. Nehemiah says, "I rebuked them, and I called curses down on them." He cussed them out. "And I beat some of the men and pulled out their hair." I mean, literally, Nehemiah put his hands on them. Okay? I mean, they got the message. Whether or not they changed anything, I don't know. And I sometimes wish I was that kind of leader, or maybe we had another kind of leader. I'm not going to do that. I've never done that. I may be more like Ezra. I just, let me just stand up and talk. Let someone else come around and grab people by the hair. But that's what Nehemiah did, because this was such a big deal to him. Because they've been in exile for generations, and they're trying to get their act together. They're trying to get the people together. Okay, and this is a huge threat to the unity of the people. And this keeps coming up throughout Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra in chapters 9 and 10, the last two chapters of Ezra is all about this problem of mixed marriages and the threat that was to the people of God. And once again, it's hard to know if they responded the right way, because in many cases then they sent their wives away, basically divorced their wives. Was that the right thing to do? I'm not sure. I don't know if they needed to do that. Did God really require that they actually do that? I don't know. Okay, here, many thousands of years later, I'm not sure how to judge that. But it was, there's a reason why they took severe action, because for hundreds of years of their own history, the people have been corrupted through these kinds of marriages that brought influences into the people of God, and it would have gone on and on for generation after generation. So I just want to talk a little bit about this, even though this might be very uncomfortable for us. The first thing to keep in mind about what's going on here is this is not a problem of, ethnic differences or racial differences. That's not the danger. There's nothing wrong with marrying someone from a different ethnicity or race or whatever. It's not about that. It's about religious, spiritual differences. The reason we know that is because, in the book of Ruth, Ruth is from Moab. She's not Jewish. And in fact, the name, the tribe, or the nation of Moab is mentioned at the beginning of chapter 13 as kind of one of those bad people. Nevertheless, Ruth, has a book named after her, and she becomes a significant ancestor for King David. Okay, the problem with Moab isn't that they were just a different people, it was that they worshiped a different God. Okay, the concern in Ezra and Nehemiah is not with, different citizenship. That has nothing to do with the story, or a different race or a different ethnicity. It has nothing to do with that. It's about people who don't know God. Okay, that's the mixed marriage. I mean, years ago when Vasma and I got married, because I'm American, there's a few of her friends were like, how can you marry an American? Now, of course, that's very, very common. But, even back, what that was 25, 26 years ago, even here in Latvia, it was like, oh, you're going to corrupt the people of Latvia by marrying an American. Okay, anyway, I stayed here, and this is my home, and I'm not leaving. Okay, but that's not the problem here. It's the religious, spiritual differences that are potentially corrupting. The second thing to keep in mind here, why this has become such a big deal, is because, there's been a consistent pattern of this in the Jewish people. It's not just an arbitrary rule. Nehemiah is not personally offended. Oh, I made this rule and you broke it, I'm going to be offended. Or I'm going to make up a couple rules that, are not necessarily that important. They're just kind of symbolic. This wasn't a symbolic kind of problem. It was this consistent evil in the Jewish people. In fact, in Nehemiah chapter 13, they even bring up the example of Solomon. Solomon, one of the wisest people according to the Old Testament. And it's said in Nehemiah chapter 13, God loved him. Nevertheless, Solomon married too many women. In this case, that was a problem. Okay, but he married people based on not what God said, but based on politics as usual. You marry the daughter of this king, it's a good political move, and you marry this important, it's a good political move. He did what everyone else was doing in the nations around him. It made sense to everyone. It was absolutely spiritually corrupting. And after Solomon, the kingdom split. Okay, it was absolutely corrupting for the people. And story after story, this king did this or married this person, and you have the whole story being corrupted. Okay, so this is why this is very important in Ezra and Nehemiah. They're trying to reestablish the people. They're trying to get the foundation solid again. Okay, and they have to make some strong moves to make that possible. Kind of the third thing I want to say about this is that I don't want us to think about this issue of mixed marriages or who we marry. I don't want to put this in the realm of rules and laws. Okay, I mean, it's a theme all through Old and New Testament, and you know, there are some verses in the New Testament that seem to indicate, you know, a Christian should only marry a Christian. You know, and Paul, for instance, talks about widows. They can get remarried, but they should only get married in the Lord. That is, they should marry someone who's also a Christian. So you see that consistently through the Bible, Old and New Testament. And you know, sometimes I felt like, yeah, this is simply a law. It's an absolute, and it's a sin, you know, if you don't obey it. Other times I try to look at it again. Is this clearly a rule? I don't want to be overly legalistic. And the truth is, it's a little bit of a gray area to me right now. Is this an absolute law or not? But really, I don't think it matters. Exactly, is this a rule, an absolute rule? Because the question is, are we going to walk wisely or not? Just because something is legally okay doesn't make it wise. What we need to do is to be wise, and we need to learn godly wisdom and not just live our lives according to what is the rule. Give me the rule and I'll just do it. Okay, that's often for children. But God wants fully functioning adults who walk in wisdom. So part of the problem of making, you know, it's a rule, a Christian only marries a Christian, is that then people think, okay, then as long as I marry another Christian, I'm okay. Maybe not. Just because that person, you know, you're dating or whatever is a Christian, might not make it wise to marry them. You still have to make a wise choice. You still have to exercise wisdom. Okay? Not every, you know, Christian is the ideal spouse for you. There's a lot of factors you need to consider. You need to be wise. We need to walk in wisdom. And so in this question of, you know, marrying people outside the faith, the question is, what is wise for you? What is a wise choice? Not just what does the law say, but what is wise for you to be faithful to God and to be the kind of person God designed you to be, and for you to fulfill the mission that God designed you to fulfill. Not every good person is necessarily good for you to fulfill the mission God has for you. It's possible to say, oh man, she's just a great girl, she's beautiful, she's smart, she's godly, but she's not for me, because I can just tell she's not going to help me with the mission God has for me. Okay, and she needs maybe another kind of spouse for her mission. Okay, but that's the wisdom we need to learn to exercise. Then the final thing I want to say about this is this reality, and it's related to walking in wisdom. Part of wisdom is being very realistic about ourselves, having a realistic view of who we are, of our strengths and also our weaknesses. Okay, and I imagine in Nehemiah's time, they make this agreement and they put it in writing, and they're thinking, we're okay now. Okay, I mean, look, we've had good leaders. We had Ezra, we had Nehemiah. Nehemiah's gone a little bit, but that's okay. We can do this. You know, we can now go on about our life. We're strong enough. We believe in ourselves. Maybe they believed in themselves too much. Maybe they thought they were stronger than they were. And maybe they need to wisely recognize we're weaker than we think we are. We might be weaker than we think we are. And so wisdom says, take that into account when you make decisions. I mean, here's a simple example from years ago, and I'm grateful here in Latvia this is no longer a problem. When I was first in Latvia, there's a lot of kiosks that was selling, you bought your tickets there in magazines, and often there'd be booksellers, with tables out in the market or different places and so forth, and so there'd be these books, and there would be pornography on tables right there, or in the kiosks up in the windows, it was just blatantly sold there with the cover of the magazine clearly in the glass. I mean, that when I was first here, that was very common. Thankfully, actually some Christians in government, I think, got all that eliminated and covered up, and I'm very grateful for that. But I, especially when I was first here as a single guy, I had to take that into account. Where I would wait for the tram was right next to a kiosk. And I had to train myself, honestly, when I go toward that kiosk, I need to go around to this side where there's no pornography on that kiosk, and not this side where my eye might catch it and it'll be a temptation, because I'm weaker than I think I am. I'm a good Christian boy, but I'm not so good. Okay? I'm weaker than I think I am. This is why there's still unfinished business, why it's an unfinished story, because the people are still living in their weaknesses. I was looking to see if I could find, a meme or an image with, we are weaker than we think we are. And so I typed that into Google search and looked at images. 0. You type in, you are weaker than you think you are. What you're going to get is, literally, you are stronger than you think you are. Believe in yourself. It's just that message. All of them are that. No one is making any memes talking about our weakness. Now, again, there can be a sense in which we can say we're stronger than we think we are. There can be times to say, believe in yourselves. Okay, so it's not that that's always wrong, but no one likes that message, we're weaker than we think we are. Okay? But wisdom says we need to have a realistic view about ourselves. This is why certain disciplines are important. This is why Christian community is important. This is why having some good Christian friends are important. Okay, I mean, your work world, and you need to engage with non-believers. You need to be friends with non-believers. You need to go to parties. You need to play football even on Sunday morning, like Dulon did one time with Blessing. Honestly, that's a good thing. But because we need to engage with people, we also need to recognize there are temptations, and we need to have a plan in place that recognizes those potential dangers, because we are weaker than we think we are. Okay, and some of you are very good at resisting peer pressure. Okay, I mean, literally, I know some of you long enough to know that you're going to forge the right path no matter what, but others of us, it's not so easy. It's not so certain that we can resist peer pressure and be faithful with keeping God in the center. All along, I knew this message was going to have to come up in Ezra and Nehemiah, and so that is something I think, I've needed to say. Other leaders in the church have thought we need to address this issue, even about who we should marry or not. But it's about making sure that God is in the center and our lives are oriented around Him. It's very easy for lives to be oriented around all sorts of other things. God doesn't remain in the center of our life unless we take action. If we don't do anything about what's in the center of our life, something else is going to fill that spot. Okay, thank you for listening to that. that's my message for this morning. I'm glad to be done with that message, but I think it's important to us. I'm going to pray, but then we're not done yet. We're save some time this morning. There's a few other people we are going to pray for this morning before we're dismissed. But let's pray before we do that. And I just want to encourage you to take a moment about walking in wisdom, and just maybe put that word wisdom in front of you, and you might make your own commitment about wisdom, about walking in wisdom and living wisely, being realistic about yourself, and taking action accordingly. So take a moment to talk to God about that. Father, though I can't make a decision for each individual here, I pray that we as a church also, as a community, as a body, as your body, would be committed to walking wisely, to being faithful, to maintaining you as the center of our church life, and whatever else that we do, the things we enjoy and the gifts that we enjoy, I pray that we would never forget you in that we would be careful to keep Christ in the center, and that he would always be everything that we are about. Amen. Okay, one of the bad things about International Church is saying goodbye to people, sometimes, hopefully not completely permanently, but sometimes for a long time. But there's two people I want us to pray for this morning. Daniel, if you could come up. Daniel has been with us for just like 6 months. He was on an internship here from Germany, but he just threw himself into life here, including leading worship and doing things. And so we're grateful for that. Could you just briefly say what's next for you now, what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm currently in the process of applying for jobs, looking for something in Germany, but yeah, I don't know exactly where it will take me.
Okay, and so in any case, he'll be going. Hopefully he'll make some visits here. It's easy to get to Riga from Germany, so hopefully we'll see him again, but be praying for him. And then Dulan, could you come up, please? Dulan is not leaving permanently, but he leaves this week for Sri Lanka because he's getting married at the end of July. Okay, he will be back, but I want to take some time to pray for him because I've mentioned a few times, things are not good in Sri Lanka. Okay, it's not a great time, to go there and get married. And like I said, I don't know what all is involved in a Sri Lankan wedding, but it's like not, it's not the best of times. So we want to pray for him and also pray that everything will work out so that soon enough his wife can join him here. Okay, also pray that he won't stay there because we want you here, okay? So could I just ask some of you, whether you've been close to them or not, maybe some of you could come up and stand around them, and let's just pray. Thank God for their presence here, and also just bless them on their next step, okay? So. Yeah, come here, Dwight. Come on. If all of you or some of you want to just pray out loud and pray for them, go for it.
have him here, and we pray that whatever will in his life, Lord, we believe that your plans are greater than ours, and so we declare, Lord, that whatever plan will be, it will be the best for him. Give him wisdom and knowledge, whatever decision he will take, guide him, protect him, keep him away from any harm. Lord, bless him mightily. Be with him.
Lord, I thank you for this young man and the journeys, exciting journey, search, growth. Lord, I pray that you lead him safely home, his fiance and life, his marriage. May you guard them to flourish, fill their lives, joy, and relationship with you, and that their trip back is really safe. Big plan. Also, for Daniel, I pray that his trip back home with his parents is safe and that he's looking for a job now. Let him find the right job, or maybe the right job will find him. And encourage his heart, bless his heart, and search for wisdom, and for him always to know he can return here to this community, and we can help out and search. Please bless his journey. Let us stay in touch with the will, and just thank you for this brief opportunity to get to know him. Bless this two young men and bless their hearts and life and craft. In Jesus' name, amen. Lord, I want to thank you for this incredible church and the great time I had here, and I'm sure for the many great times Duan has had here and will have here. And I want to pray for Duan and his marriage and that he will have a safe time in Ceylon. Thank you, Lord.
The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and give you peace. And to you as well. Go with God. Have a great afternoon.